I don't know how much awareness people have when you get to situations where you're in a fascist state. How much awareness, at what point it kicks in, where the majority of people realize, like, hey, wait a second. And it's quite possible that when you reach that point, it's too late. And from my perspective, I don't know where we are on that scale to getting to fascism, but you need to go through what we are going through now and have been going through for really the past 5 or 6 years. And maybe even, prior to that. You need to go through those steps to get to fascism. So it's not like we're not on the right path. We're on the right path. I just don't know, where you determine where we're at. But I think it really is, it's hard to assess, and it's important to call out because, and I'll tell you, and this is what else is I think is good about both Biden canceling student debt. Obviously, I want him to have done more. And also the passage of the climate and the Medicare bill, insufficient as they are. At this moment, the worst thing that can happen is that people feel it is pointless and useless, and that there's, the best thing about that move that Biden did with the college loan stuff and the that legislation is that there's some semblance of, like, at the very least, it shows people a path to a government that actually can provide and actually can do some things. It's not enough.
Contrasting it with semi-fascist, because if you say we're on the road to fascism, right? And I agree that if the Republicans win the presidency, we are definitely on the road. Then you make that clear. You make that clear within the context of what you're providing and within the context of who they are.
Right. And it's not even necessarily a contrast with the fascists. It's just that it's also a contrast to nihilism. And that is what opens the door, it seems to me. It is when there's a sense that nothing's going to get done. I can't remember what it was that I read recently, but the argument about what led Germany to fascism, aside from obviously the humiliation and the poverty and the austerity, was the sense that their government wasn't doing anything about it. And so a guy who comes in and says, I'm going to get the trains to run on time. That becomes the message that you hear. And Trump very much, sort of expressed, I'm just going to get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't really do it when he was president, but how is he going to get it done?
The dynamic I'm finding really frustrating is how all of these, whether it's the right-wing crowd or Rubin folks, to the Jimmy Dore style grifters, are helping the GOP hide behind their own supporters. It's not Joe Biden calling out Republican Party fascism. He's actually talking about the voters. He's actually talking about the voters themselves. Yes. This is another deplorables. And I just want to read Jimmy Dore's description from his video entitled Biden's speech full of MAGA hate and division. Joe Biden traveled to Independence Hall in Philadelphia to deliver a speech excoriating Trump supporters as violent threats to the rule of law. Was he just talking about Trump supporters as violent threats to the rule of law?
They conflate that.
Democracy and the Constitution. That Biden delivered a speech decrying his detractors as fascists in front of a blood-red backdrop reminiscent of something out of The Triumph of the Will was not lost on observers. And, Jimmy...
Was it Triumph of the Will in black and white?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
I don't know, but the fact that they are what
it was in black and white.
It was in black and white.
Yeah. It's sort of out of the chat.
Yeah, it came out in 1935. So right. It was in black and white.
He's laundering his protection of the Republican Party and this faux populism where you're it's just I don't want the regular Joes, the supporters, the demonization of the Trump supporters. He's standing up for the little guy.
Yeah, you're Joe the plumber.
Michael from Bavaria writes, Weimar had extreme gridlock and repeatedly elected new governments. I mean, I think, and that's That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's like some sense that there's at least some movement indicates that something can be done within the context of the way that our government works.
And some more shallow analysis is that it helps Democrats electorally to get something done. Like, again, like our criticism of the Biden administration bringing Republicans into the fold for the infrastructure negotiations was that it's not about bipartisanship. Appearing like you're working with Republicans doesn't win elections. Wins, electoral or legislative wins and action is what propels you to having some more success, because people want to think their president's doing something.
The distinguished Gentile man writes in YouTube channel called 3 Arrows, has many great videos on fascist German history and how it connects America. That's what it was. It was a 3 Arrows video that was talking about that gridlock in Weimar and saying that was, sort of like one of the real precipitating elements to fascism coming there. And between the 101 and 5, so I would recommend go check out the 3 Arrows. It's definitely worth your while. Really smart stuff there. Between 101 and the 5, I'd say the Bush era Iraq Afghanistan war has really whetted the appetite for fascism for sure. I think that's true too. I mean, I certainly believed really the primary reason why I left show business to do the Majority Report on Air America. And at the time, I'll be honest with you, I thought, like, I'm going back. This is a 6-month thing. I think Judy and I basically said, we were like, we'll do it for 6 months, April to, November, really, and then maybe into January. And then, that'll be it. And because I felt at the time that like 2004 was the last chance for the states. I felt like what happened with the 2000 election and what happened with 9/11, like we were just on the wrong path. And in some ways, like we're still on that same trajectory. And the thing I've learned since then, there are times where I was like, oh, maybe I was wrong. And then there are times like lately, I'm like, maybe I was right, because there's a certain trajectory. And what I've learned from doing this, doing the online show is just this concept, and also living through a pandemic, is that the way trajectories move is not a smooth line. There are spikes and then a return to a new normal. And then a spike, and then a return to a new normal. And we don't know yet if Trump was a spike, we drop back down to Biden, but things still simmer, and then like DeSantis or Tom Cotton. And that could come in 4 years, come in 2 years or 8 years. Like, history is just long. Like time is long. Trends are long. They don't have to exist in a 10-year period of time. None of this stuff is going to go away in the short term. And I will say this, that like with climate change, this stuff gets more intense and becomes more precarious. And, in many respects, I don't know what we're doing here, right? Like you can't really tell like what we're doing here. And by we, I mean like people who do what we do. And I don't have an inflated sense of the impact of this show in any way. I do think that like the nature of our audience is such that like they're going out and doing more than your average audience. That is like people, that is the way that I at least perceive it. But there's going to come a time, probably well past where I'm around, where, there's going to be crossroads and people are going to need to draw on history and other ideas in which to inform the decisions they make going forward. And crossroads that may be far more intense than our situation now. Because climate change, and I don't know where, but right now we got like, a third of Pakistan underwater? You don't think that's going to have geopolitical implications I mean, they have a nuke. They've got what was it 33 million people who were displaced? They're going to go somewhere. That's going to cause like a disruption, and that could cause tensions with India. And that type of dynamic, the Syrian civil war in many respects, some people say was a function maybe of climate change because the wheat harvest was down. They sold the reserves. Then the price of wheat went up. And then there was we don't know. And
migration due to climate change is going to create nationalism in pockets of the world.
And it is going, and maybe we're already seeing it. Maybe we're already seeing, Syrian civil war pushes immigration up to Europe. Europe goes sideways. The important thing is just like, that I like to think, I may be totally deluded, that our audience, and particularly the young people in our audience, my age cohort represents, at least in the context of the YouTube audience, I think our audio audience is probably a little bit older than this, but my age cohort is the smallest one that we have. Over the age of 55 is the smallest cohort that we have on this show. And there are other shows that do much better than we do. People who I like get much bigger numbers on YouTube, actually have a much older age cohort. And if we're going to have any lasting impact, it is like for 18 to 24-year-olds, 24 to 35-year-olds, and 35 to 44-year-olds, and 44 to 55-year-olds having ideas and understanding and been exposed to ideas and history, so that like when the shit really hits the fan, people are better prepared, at least intellectually. So, yes, Gowanus Monster, you had recently watched the 3 Hours America Coming to Weimar moment. That's exactly what it was. I didn't see all of it, but yes.
Very self-reflective show today.
Yeah, a little navel gazing for entering into the fall.